Thank you very much. Thanks, Kumaravel. I think it's my 10th year at the Receptor meeting, and I've always been blessed with the ability to choose my own topic, but also get a few extra minutes to delay you from lunch today. So for those of you who followed me over the years, this has been my opening slide for many of these, that the main problem with most of the diseases we have is the last 50 to 70 years we have played with human nature. We eat more food. We eat food when it's not required. We are the only species that kills and eats for pleasure. We have more light than we need. We don't sleep. We have flattened the earth, and of course stress, and we don't have sunlight. Now, I also want to bring out this particular statement from Ananda Kumaraswamy and others that talks about this particular one, and I'm going to link this up. Every subatomic particle not only performs an energy dance, but also is an energy dance, a pulsating process of creation and destruction without end. For the modern physicist, then, Shiva's dance is the dance of subatomic matter. So the question that we want to ask is, are we cosmically linked? Is there something that links us that creates a harmony? And when you disturb that harmony, we get the kind of diseases that we are facing. So let me take this from so many of what I'm going to speak is biologically a hypothesis. I will throw in the evidences where they are required. But remember, there is some hypothesis generation. I've been in this for many years, but I want to talk about how some of this got my attention. It's very interesting. I heard about mycelial networks about 20 years ago. But it's interesting that when trees are there in a forest, the older trees are responsible for protecting the younger trees through a network. And we never knew how they communicated. And this happened through fungi and mycelial networks that would spread through the roots and sustain the forest. The fungi maintained a saprophytic relationship between these trees that sustained forests through droughts. How do these come to live together, sustain each other, and make them live? Think about it. I'm going to get to the next one. When a mother, I always wonder how Western culture even survived. Because one of the things that Western culture is that you're not supposed to sleep on the same bed with your children. You could go to jail in some countries like Sweden. But it's very interesting when an infant has fever, there is a salivary reflex. When the baby suckles the mother, there is a salivary penetration of the skin, and the next milk that the baby has immunomodulating capacities that protect the child. This is how interconnected we are. I'm an endocrinologist now for 30 plus years, so 28, 29 years after my last degree. And I can tell you that we haven't scratched the surface of hormones. If you think that the primary purpose of hormones is communications, I can tell you endocrinology is in its infancy, because we don't understand how we communicate. We understand some hormonal communication, but we don't understand how cells communicate. But I'm going to tell you that species communicate. If you have dogs, you realize that how they blackmail you, right? But how many of you realize that dogs have developed a unique muscle in their eyebrows that allows them to blackmail you? Right? This is the future. This is the history of communication. The basic things that bind us have two important things. One is an internal clock. This clock is Kala, it is time, it is the cosmos. its binding, its oscillations, its generations. It's a molecular structure that has been preserved for millions and millions of years, right? The second is this is linked with light. If you're a plant, you provide sugar. I mean, many of you seen, I've talked about this before. If you're a plant species, you make glucose when it's light, and then you rejuvenate when it's dark. If you're a predator, you make glucose by killing during light, and you rejuvenate when it's dark and rejuvenate. But that's it. These are conserved. You can change a lot of things about human life or life. We can't play with these two things: time and the life-dark cycle. The moment you interfere with these, disease occurs. But let me introduce you some fantastic things that we've learned. It is so fantastic that the fly thing is flickering. That while we think, I didn't use AI for my slide, so it's not flickering. So, very interesting that while we think that this body belongs to us, you have built a beautiful house. It costs you $1 million, right? And then, in the slide, sorry, they don't like that slide. You think the body thinks you think it's your house, but also there's a rat in that house that it thinks it's its house. Similarly, our body is also home to 1 trillion bacteria. And they live and they support us. And interestingly, they actually help you digest things that you were never built to digest. There are so many of your nutrients that you can never digest without the presence of these bacteria. And guess who gives it to you? Your mother. You all wonder, I'm very happy that Sriram brought about it. There are so many things about our ancient wisdom that we don't understand, that we poo-poo it. But if you ever, and since this is people who talk about Chidambaram and Madurai, this is Meenakshi's home, right? And why do you call women Shakti? From a cellular level, there are two things your mother gives you. One is mitochondria. There is not a single mitochondrial DNA in sperm. Only 4 families in the entire literature have had male mitochondria inherited. That's one she gives you. So she gives you the power to create energy from the food you provide. Then she gives you the bacteria that help you digest the food that you eat. Even if you have had a C-section, after the first breast milk is taken, you get colonized by her bacteria. And if you believe in C. elegans data, these kind of imprinting occurs at least 14 generations. So you're basically your mother's, right? That is the inheritance you have. My favorite author in the whole world is J.K. Rowling. And my favorite philosopher in the whole world, no offense to Shankara, who's my guru, is Albus Dumbledore. And he says, love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. The bacteria that you've inherited and the mitochondria, she's given you the mitochondria to process the energy, but she's given the bacteria to protect those mitochondria. And have you heard of FAFO? F word around and find out. Our interest in this started 10, 15 years ago when we published one of the first data on gut microbiome and diabetes. And interestingly, these are the traditional functions of diabetes, mitochondria. Control of inflammation, immune response, vitamins, protein production. You can't get certain vitamins with these bacteria. Interestingly, this interest when we first started publishing and going up, this is an article we wrote in 2019, And I'm seeing that its sell by date is gone, but it's still this is its 2025 citations that people for some reason have graduated with, and I built on this over a period of time. The first thing these bacteria do is they ferment your food. That fermentation is a big part of what they do, and then they break it down into ways that it can communicate to the body. What I'm going to talk about is how they communicate with you. When these bacteria are good and they communicate well with you, you have health and eubiosis. When you provide crap into your stomach, they communicate badly and they create disease. It's as simple as that. It's if you believe the Vedas, they will tell you Annam Pranamai Brahma, that your body is made of food. Annaiva Prana. If you don't believe in it, you will at the end of my talk. Interestingly, your microbiome actually programs how fat is distributed in the body. Meaning that your microbiome determines whether you have an android distribution of fat or a gynecoid distribution of fat. Right? And remember, when the fat distribution, the AG ratio in women hits 0.8, you will not find a single woman who does not have PCOS or does not have glucose intolerance. When gut dysbiosis occurs, you get metabolic disease. So, to summarize this, just look at this. There are three things that microbiota produce: short-chain fatty acids, secondary bile acids, and their structural components. They influence these hormones. The first hormone, and can you see on top of it is this hormone called GLP-1, and all the discussions that we're having today about how these improve our reward system, about our weight, about all of these, is because these communicate with GLP-1. I'll show you data. And these affect glucose metabolism, insulin storage, insulin sensitivity, fat storage, feeding and satiety. And as Shruti was talking about, thanks Shruti for quoting my 2014 article. That's how this, I wrote one of the first articles on the neuroendocrinology of love, and I'll connect this in a moment. So in a healthy gut, you have a firmicutous dominance. On the other hand, the moment your gut has diabetes, the microbiota change. But how does it change is a story. And the story is something very interesting because we all know that we communicate. But actually, and species can communicate. Otherwise, men and women will never communicate. It's one of the first instances of interspecies communication. Ilya, men and women are two different species. How they communicate? But bacteria communicate. They communicate by first breaking down the dietary fiber and converting it into short-chain fatty acids. The second, they communicate by creating bile acids. And the third, they communicate by lipopolysaccharides. The short-chain fatty acids are the ones that actually work at the level of the liver. They decrease lipogenesis, they decrease the inflammation, they cause satiety, they work with cardiovascular risk. Why? Because they work through a particular hormone that today you use to treat diabetes called GLP-1. Right? The second is they also work through the fastenoid X receptor. The third, I won't get into, is by creating lipopolysaccharides, they break the intestinal barrier and they cause inflammation. Very interestingly, we all know that when we eat food, our insulin goes up. This is called glucose-stimulated insulin secretion. What? And glucose-stimulated insulin secretion is made up of by two hormones, GLP-1 and GIP. GIP is responsible for the first phase of insulin secretion. GLP is responsible for the second phase of insulin secretion. But what if I took your gut and I cleansed it of all your microbiota? I removed it and then gave you food. What would happen? Zero insulin response. Why? because you need GLP-1 for it. And if you don't have gut microbiota, there is no postprandial GLP-1 increase. So now do you realize where the microbiota come in? The right kind of microbiota increase the GLP-1, causing your pancreas to respond with insulin adequately to digest your food. On the other hand, if the right microbiota are not there, the GLP-1 response is inadequate, the beta cell response is inadequate, you get diabetes. This is the link. We didn't understand this for so many years. But the link is gut dysbiosis. I am making a few connections, but this is largely evidence-based. So which means what is really happening is, we now don't call it, we should stop calling it incretins and others. We should use this word NUSH, nutrient-stimulated hormones. And it's not just one, it's GIP, it's PPY, it's oxyntomodulin. We know a lot more about GLP-1 because we've studied it. But what really happens is that the dietary fibers stimulate gut microbiota, and they act through these receptors, and they cause production of, to the L cell, it is GLP, it causes GLP-1 production, and these cause all the biological effects that we are now very, very useful. So the gut microbiota are the main reasons why these intestinal hormones are regulated, and because if the gut microbiota are intact, you don't have dysmetabolism. Very fascinating theory, but it fits in with our global thinking about it. And it's not in one place. These are all the cells that are present throughout the enteric this thing, and these are all the hormones that are stimulated by it. So this is the hormone release. I won't get into the details, but just to understand how this goes on. So GLP-1 stimulates insulin and promotes satiety. And how is it increased? When your food contains sufficient amount of bacteria, it has sufficient amount of dietary fiber to cause a lining which harbors this particular bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila. When you have Akkermansia, then your diabetes is low, your colonic cancer is low, and it's also present in longevity, right? On the other hand, ghrelin, if you have greater amount of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, you get it. Then all the others. I already talked about it, I won't get too much to it, but just to understand that you need to have the right bacteria to get things about. Now, what is to take this to the next thing forward? Remember that we eat more simply because our reward systems are completely screwed up. Why? My usual thing is hedonic inputs, which we call, the Indian way is much better. Your indriyas or your senses, they link to your mana, which is your mind, which overrides you may know it's right or wrong, but you still override it because your intellect is clouded, because you don't have the discriminatory capacity or vairagya. These are mediated by two hormones. Liking is made by endorphins, opiates especially. The motivation to go get that food is by dopamine. To take Shruti's idea, I may like somebody very much, but dooratlen path pe. I won't get motivated to go take them simply because my dopamine tells me, don't go there. Right? Exactly. But that's with food, because your wife is not going to slipper you if you eat a little more, your dopamine motivation is overridden. But what seems to be happening, why is it that we are not able to do it? When there is inflammation in your gut by the wrong kind of food, the communication that goes to the brain is that it overrides your reward system. So if you eat what your grandmother ate, your mother was probably also eating junk. But your grandmother and her grandmother were following learned the discipline, just like monogamy, just like mate selection, that when the rule of duty is trained into you, when discipline, which is a bad word in today's language, is trained into you, you will say, no, I shouldn't eat at this time. And that becomes ingrained into you and say, no, if it is ingrained into you, then your cortex is overriding that dopamine pathway. And the more you do it, remember that in patients with obesity, in patients with diabetes, there is actually hypothalamic inflammation that occurs. The pathways are overridden by the wrong kind of microbiota that are sitting in your gut. Very interestingly, now remember I started with time. These microbiota are rhythmic, that they have an internal clock where on a day-to-day basis, their ability to ferment your gut, your food, and process it also varies. Just like your mitochondrial processing varies according to the time, they are also rhythmic. So if you eat at the wrong time, you get unprocessed inflammatory stuff, right? So the gut microbiota is circadian, and interestingly, it has been very, very well shown in studies that they control your NASH by this process. That the rhythmic secretion of GLP-1 is controlled by the rhythmic oscillation of gut microbiota. Interestingly, it has been very well shown there are only two things that cause hepatic dysbiosis, this thing. One, you knock off the clock, which is BMAL1, or you knock off the gut microbiota. Both of these cause hepatic dysfunction. The two keys in our lives are clock and bacteria. You play with it, get diabetes. Which means the only way to overrun is to lead a life that is as close to your ancestors as possible, because it has evolved over a period of time. Respect the food that your ancestors ate, and respect the time in which food needs to be eaten. Not only that, this is fantastic data I'm going to extend this for a few more minutes, please, this thing. Sorry, daily correct. Okay, but today, I can get apples in summer. I can get even avaraka in summer. But today it is processed and stored. Here is some very elegant data from pandas in, I love comparative and animal endocrinology, so please bear with me. This is data that was done in the foraging forest of where the panda roams free. What they showed was that the PER2 cytochrome, which is the clock gene, varies depending on this, and the butyrate producing bacteria actually change based on the cycle. So one of the things that I have started telling patients is, not only eat at the right time, eat seasonal foods. Why should you eat seasonal foods? Because it depends on, I won't go into this, but it depends on something very interesting. I'll come back to this part. It is because it is not just our bacteria, but the soil bacteria that vary. The soil microbiome is responsible for the health of the food that you eat. And today, if you have, the moment you process food, that you take things away, you take the benefit of these interconnected kingdoms that we live in. We don't live alone. We are not the masters of what we purvey. We are one cog in the cosmic wheel. You respect it, we do well. If you don't respect it, you do poorly. In fact, to go back, this is what happens. Now, what happens to how do these drugs work? A lot of times we know that there is a direct effect. It causes weight loss, it causes glucose control. But we are seeing all these other benefits, right? We are seeing cardiovascular benefits, we are seeing heart failure benefits. We talk about off-target benefits. I don't know if this is the answer, but I can tell you one thing, that when you give GLP-1 analogs, a very interesting thing changes. The gut microbiota become more protective. Not over a short period of time, but this data has been done with dulaglutide, with semaglutide, and now with exenatide. It looks like that the gut microbiota improve over a period of time. So at least part of this could be explained by the change in the gut microbiome. So let me close this because I've taken a lot of time. This is a very fascinating article that I've been reading for a while that talks about that there are some microbiota that tell you how long you live. That there are some species that seem to be marking these people for longevity. This is extreme longevity, showing that this particular group, the Akkermansia, the Rosiobacter, seem to be particularly present in people who live extremely long. I haven't looked at the blue zone data, but those of you who go to Palakkad, please get some stool samples, because in India, the one place where people live longer than most is my ancestral home of Palakkad. These people get up in the morning, do their duty, walk around because it's a hilly area, eat twice a day. Very old, traditional way of living. And it seems to be the only blue zone in this country, right? And that's true of where nature and tradition seem to be preserved, blue zones exist. So this is the story. The microbiome coexists with us. Alterations of the microbiome cause dysmetabolic changes through NASH. The treatments that you're using are using nature's old way of doing things. I'm sorry about this, it's come back. The microbiome controls our metabolism. We think we own this bacteria. The bacteria has been given by your mother and it says, obey me. Let me come back. Everybody knows this Nataraja, where is it? Look at the foot. Yes. The source of all movement, Shiva's dance, gives rhythm to this universe. He dances in evil places, in sacred places. He creates, he preserves, he destroys and releases. We are all part of this dance. This eternal rhythm that is by the clock, by the bacteria, by the food we eat. We are the food we eat. We change it, and we are the time of the food we eat. We are the season of the food we eat. We change it, we invite disease, death, and diabetes. So with that, thank you so much.